One more time. Double. Perfect.
You did it twice?
Yeah. You know what it is for, right?
No. It means start.
This is the Gemischt interview, the organic conversation with Sandro Schweitzer. There you go.
So hello, I'm very happy to have here with me Professor SHEPARDSON from Hunter College.
Which camera am I looking in?
That doesn't matter. Either way is fine. It's interesting because Professor One asked the same question. But yeah, he is currently my Plato teacher. That's very exciting. Good day, Professor SHEPARDSON.
Good day, Sandra.
Would you mind introducing yourself real quick?
Hey, everybody. I'm Doug SHEPARDSON. I'm a visiting assistant professor of philosophy here. I'm a Plato specialist. I'm currently teaching a course on ethics, a course on Greek philosophy, and the Plato class that you're in.
Excellent. That's great. So I think we're going to get started with the questions.
Sure.
And we're going to move this sand clock. So we're not going to go over time too much.
Woo!
Ta-da.
Fun.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you. So, you are here as a new professor, like Professor One that I was just talking to, and Professor Ferguson that I will talk to tomorrow. And we are here at Hunter College in your office in the philosophy department among books. And I was wondering, what book are you currently reading?
That's a good question. So
I saw you were reading an article as well. But
yes.
Do you prefer reading books or articles?
I don't mind. I don't differentiate between them. So I'm usually reading like 15 to 20 books at once.
Oh, wow.
Various different parts of them. So in my ethics class, we're going through the Nicomachean Ethics.
Okay.
Working on an article on Plato's Apology still. So I have a source book on the Apology.
Right.
We are going over the Philebus later in our Plato class. So I have that here. And I'm in the middle of an article on the method of collection and division in the Philebus.
Oh, wow.
With the collecting the letters and stuff like that.
Okay. Well,
if you did the reading.
I did do the reading,
okay,
but
good.
this is about you, not about me. You can ask me this in 2 hours.
Still talking about what I'm reading.
That's true. But it's interesting. Do you read mostly what you have to or what you prepare for class, or do you read something beyond what is your specialty?
I think it's easiest to answer this question in terms of like a year-long basis, because differs depending on the months and stuff. I'd say that over the course of a year, I usually read everything I'm teaching unless I've taught the class like 15 times. So like with the ethics class, I don't always do the readings because I know the material so well. Same with like Plato. I don't always do the reading for the Plato classes, especially if we're doing the parts of the text that I know like inside out.
That's amazing.
The second half of the Plato class, I haven't read those things that carefully or that recently. So I found myself having to reread those a lot more.
That's fine.
Now, each semester, since I tend to teach 50-60% of the same material from year to year, I try to read a new article or book chapter on whatever I'm teaching at least once a week.
To keep yourself up to date?
Yeah, to stay aware of like current developments in the literature and stuff like that.
Well, it actually, I want to stay on this topic then for a little bit.
Yeah.
Because
that's just preparing for class. Then there's also research for articles that I'm working on and stuff like that. So I'm currently working on I guess I have like 2 articles under submission at journals right now. And then I have another 3 that I'm like vaguely working on. So I'll be reading things from those different areas. Working on a paper on Aristotle's theory of definition. So I have like a book about his theory of definition in biology here, things like that. And then I just like read things completely outside of my area for fun.
Do you have a favorite book, for example?
Yeah, it's Plato's Phaedo. Would be my favorite book.
I mean, it
without
just shows,
question, Plato's Phaedo.
That just shows the passion that you have for your field. And it's what I find interesting here is when you say new articles about Plato, Aristotle. So I'm jumping ahead a bit of a question that I prepared. So astrophysicist Lawrence Krauss said that philosophers often tend to use fallible argument of, or the fallible argument of authority When they, for example, say, well, Plato already said, well, Aristotle said, that's what philosophers tend to do. And I mean, when I watch podcasts or talks or whatever, I hear that often, that argument, well, Aristotle already said, and that seems to be like an argument that, wants to hook on authority, historical thought.
I think that might happen in podcasts and stuff, but that certainly doesn't happen in professional journals. Like no professional philosophers saying you should believe this simply because Aristotle did.
Right.
Yeah.
But what I find interesting together with this is that so much like these guys were 2,500 years ago.
Yeah.
And that people are still writing about them. So I find that fascinating when you said new articles about Aristotle. So what's developments in this?
I mean, there's a lot. So like, just in terms of like ancient philosophy, we've come to a much better appreciation of like the structure of Aristotle's metaphysics in the past like 20 years or so. So you're not in my Aristotle class right now. So do you know the metaphysics?
I do.
So in the metaphysics, he says that in book 1 that he's looking for wisdom. And he wants to find out what wisdom is, and wisdom is supposed to be knowledge of the most fundamental principles and causes of everything, or of the most fundamental causes of the world. Later on in book Beta, he gives us a bunch of puzzles to solve regarding philosophy. And it's always been like, what is this random piece of puzzles doing here? Well, a very big development in studies on Aristotle's metaphysics in the past like 40 years or so was that the puzzles he mentions in Beta, I think there's like 14 of them, form a kind of roadmap of puzzles that he's going to try to solve in later parts of the metaphysics. Mm-hmm. So if you look at Beta 1, the first problem, or not the first, one of the first like 3 or 4 problems he mentions is whether or not philosophy or the study of being has a unique, is a unique science or a unique discipline. And the way that like mathematics differs from chemistry, does philosophy, or specifically the study of being itself, differ from, other sciences like mathematics? Does it differ from sophistry, from dialectic, and so on? And if you look at book Gamma, the next book of the metaphysics, that's exactly what Aristotle does. Mm-hmm. So it's that kind of insight that we can read the structure of the metaphysics by looking at the problems that occur in Beta, is a very recent insight. So that's just one teeny tiny example, but that's the kind of things that happen in secondary literature.
Yeah, and how current this old stuff still is.
Yeah.
That's fascinating, right? What does philosophy, like how do philosophies and STEM courses, classes differ, or like how does philosophy stick out from other disciplines?
Yeah, so I think that it's important to note that I'm not an expert in other disciplines, so I probably shouldn't be trying to speak about them. That said, I did take some science classes and stuff in undergrad, and I can say how my experiences differed in that sense. Philosophers are much more concerned with carefully reading the text itself instead of extracting a theory from it. Mm-hmm. So in science classes, you don't read Isaac Newton. You don't read Einstein. You read a textbook that takes Einstein's
the formula.
Yeah, and explains it in a page or two instead of having to read Einstein's 20 pages or whatever. So that's a very different method and approach right there. Philosophers are really painstakingly going through the text, sometimes looking for secrets and further knowledge, whereas in the sciences, the thought is that there's 1 or 2 important things in the article, and all we need to do is extract those 1 or 2 important things out of the article and teach it.
Well, I think that's interesting, but so the tools in philosophy, they say, are thought experiments, right?
It's one type of tool.
But opposed to, let's say, peer-reviewed scientific papers that have...
Well, our articles are peer-reviewed.
They are peer-reviewed, but are they... like the fundament of the knowledge after they're peer-reviewed in a way as the sciences move forward?
What do you mean?
Well, the scientific method doesn't really apply to philosophy. Would you agree or not?
No,
No.
I think you can apply it to philosophy in certain ways. So, I mean, the scientific method is about proposing a hypothesis to explain some phenomenon and then testing the results of that hypothesis. We do that all the time with our thesis statements.
And see whether previous claim can be
yeah,
proven false
more or
right,
less.
like
Yeah,
it can be, but it moves forward into new knowledge or wisdom, depending on what philosopher you want to use for this terminology.
yeah. It could give you new knowledge, new book or article advancing a thesis that say like consciousness is immaterial. So my hypothesis is that consciousness is immaterial. We're not going to have an actual experiment. We're not going to design an experiment where we then collect data and see whether the hypothesis best explains that data. But you can play that role with the thought experiments.
Right.
And you can see whether or not the thought experiments cohere with our intuitions.
So it's like the observation in physics, maybe?
Yeah, I think it plays a similar role to that.
Do you have a favorite thought experiment that comes on top of you?
Nietzsche's eternal recurrence.
Can you explain it real quick?
Gladly.
I wish I could and I should, but...
What if some day or night a demon were to steal after you into your loneliest loneliness and say to you that this life as you once lived it and have now lived it, you'll have to live once more and innumerable times more, and there will be nothing new in it, but every pain and joy and every sadness, and now I don't have it memorized anymore, and every sorrow and misery, and even the spider and I myself in the moonlight here will all be repeated to you in the same succession. Would you gnash your teeth and curse the demon who spoke thus? Or would you praise him and tell him that he's a god and you've never heard anything more divine? So the thought here is about your life and the choices that you've made and the way your life is going. And he says that you should imagine a demon, which Nietzsche's a classicist, is probably a daimon, right? It could be the Socratic daimon, the divinity, or it could be the evil demon, depending on your frame of mind in answering the question. So he asked that question. Your whole life is going to be repeated in the same exact way. You and I have had this conversation in this room millions of times before. And the universe had a big bang.
Infinite even, right?
Infinitely.
And will have again.
Yeah. And then a big crunch. Big bang, big crunch, big bang, big crunch. But the big bang banged in the same way.
As the crunch. Yeah.
Well, the same way it did previously.
Exactly, yeah.
So
like
you and I...
complete copy
exactly.
of no origin then. Then time becomes irrelevant.
Yes. So then if you hear that, there's two responses. Does that terrify you? I've made mistakes with my life. Oh my God, what am I doing? Or is it instead a kind of, I don't know, cherry on top of your life? It calms you
down because you know
life
what,
has been
whatever.
So awesome.
It's already been happening anyway. It's like we talked personally about determinism as well at some point.
Very related to that.
Exactly, yeah. Well, I want to. We might have to go back to other questions, but we're already in the middle of such a good conversation. So, like, imagine this demon or daimon came, and he would give you a ring that made you invisible. With it, like, what do you think? And please take your time. Because I need some quotes for my paper on that anyway. I use this. So what would you do if you would get a ring that would make you invisible?
With an invisibility ring? I don't think I'd really do all that much differently. When my kids come home, I might slip it on so I can get work done without them. Daddy, come here.
Okay.
I don't think I certainly wouldn't use it to be unjust or do anything like that.
Because that's where the claim comes from the myth of mind.
Yeah, exactly. You're not supposed to use it for bad things, but part of me might be tempted to use it for Robin Hood-esque things. You know, can we try to help people out?
But you can say that now, knowing we don't know, right? Because once you have this, like, well, actually, that feels all so different than. You know, I said in Sandro's podcast a week ago, and you throw all of that overboard. So it's a very hypothetical thought experiment.
Yeah, and that's what Glaucon says. Glaucon says that anybody who has this ring, if you're telling yourself you wouldn't loot and steal and murder, you're kidding yourself. Anybody who had that ring would do that.
But the problem with this thought experiment is that there is no way to prove any of this, I suppose.
No, there's no way to prove whether or not...
Because your brain can trick you in all sorts of possibilities. And even if you knew for yourself right now that you would rob a bank within 5 minutes, you would still probably not even say that. So that's the next problem.
I certainly wouldn't admit it. Right.
So we don't even know if you think that,
right,
or you think that,
right,
even less if you say what you think.
Yeah.
And I think that's where thought experiments sometimes become tricky. Still
certainly
interesting. I love it, right?
Yeah, certainly.
Study philosophy.
Yeah, what we're trying to get with thought experiments is that they differ from real experiments, and that real experiments are trying to manipulate some variable in order to see what the results are of that manipulation. Classic example here is you put a mouse in a maze, cheese at the end, see how long it takes them to get the cheese, inject them with new brain drug, chemical S,
right,
whatever it is.
Manipulate.
Do they do it faster?
Right.
In philosophy, that's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do instead is use the thought experiments to help find out what we really think, unencumbered with baggage of presuppositions from elsewhere. So like Judith Thompson, have you read her defense of abortion? Yeah. So
yes.
Yeah, so like with the violinist being attached
exactly,
to you.
Yeah.
A lot of flamboyant examples, actually. So she thinks that one of the purposes of thought experiments is that the question of abortion has so much political baggage wrapped up with it. Anybody who was born in a Republican household, say in America, is going to have certain feelings. Most people born in liberal households in America are going to have certain feelings. So the issue is that your upbringing has put a lot of baggage into your mind and your beliefs about abortion. So one of the cool things about thought experiments is we can take the question of abortion, take it out of that context, and leave all the baggage, leave all of the presuppositions that are going to interfere with trying to figure it out, and just analyze that question alone through the violinist or opening windows or whatever it is. Yeah.
I kind of throw you in a cold water so you don't have another chance to come up with another solution. Yeah, that's very, very interesting. And staying in the world of hypotheses, and that's a question that I like to ask in this podcast. If you could ask anybody anything, who would it be?
Plato, did you abandon the forms after the Parmenides?
Okay, just say that one more time.
Plato, did you abandon the forms after the Parmenides?
What do you think?
I tend to think no, but this is a very, very contentious topic in Plato studies because the Parmenides rips apart the forms, and then in the dialogues thought to come after that, they're not as present, or if they are present, they're not the mystical, quasi-religious objects of devotion that they are in the Phaedo and the Symposium. They're more abstract, the way like you could imagine like a Quine talking about universals or something, than Plato talking about the beautiful divine forms. So that would probably be my question. The other would be, what order are we supposed to write your dialogues in? What order did you write them in, and what order are we supposed to read them in, and are they the same?
Okay.
Those would be my questions.
I mean, I find it...
I should tell you everything you need to know about me. Any question, those would be my 3 questions.
I think that's interesting because I ask this question quite a lot, and some people take a lot of time to find a person and the question. So I always find it fascinating when people just comes out like a shotgun. I
think of the people who decide to do their PhD on one person, that one person is always going to be the answer to that question.
And Professor One said the same thing.
Who
she said she would ask Frege how he felt about the defeat of his theories
with Russell.
Exactly, yeah. Which we don't have to get into because I already covered it.
No, that's not my field anyway, so I shouldn't be talking about it.
Well, that will be maybe even more interesting because it raises my question, and I had to read in the paper I wrote to you. It's not begging, it doesn't beg the question, it raises the question. Right? Interestingly, I found out about that mistake 2 days after I submitted them.
Happens.
But
I didn't take points off for that. Like that's not the type of thing I deduct points for.
Well, it's fine. No, I didn't say you didn't. I mean, who knows? But
no, I'm just pointing it out.
But what do you know? Do you know something that you are sure you know it? Because that's a big question in philosophy.
You're asking, do I think that I have knowledge of anything?
Exactly. Or what are you certain you have knowledge of?
All right. So, okay.
Or can you be certain that you have? Yeah.
All right. A few things here. So first of all, since Descartes associated certainty and knowledge, basically everyone after him has thought that that was too strong of a criterion. That if we're looking for certainty, 100% absolute logical certainty, no one knows anything.
Not even that we hear because of the brain in the vat, right? That would have
no, so the brain in the vat problem, if you want to apply it to Descartes' solipsism and like the first meditation, you could say that even a brain in a vat still exists, because the brain in the vat still
right, exactly. It still needs stuff.
Right, yeah. And Descartes defines thinking, so I think, therefore I am. He defines thinking as any like mental action. Yeah. So desiring, willing, wanting, affirming, denying, believing, disbelieving, whatever. All of those are going to imply that something exists.
What's your take on this, like now, like
So for it now, so I don't think that we have certainty of anything, really. But in terms of knowledge, I do think we have knowledge. And that's because I think that knowledge is contextual, meaning that the requirements for knowledge differ according to conversational context. We're talking about Descartes right now. Right. If I weren't to mention contextualism and I weren't to mention different types of knowledge, if we were just naturally talking about Descartes and I said, I don't know that I'm awake right now, you would take me to mean the standards for knowledge are extremely high and I can't prove that I'm not dreaming. However, when my wife texts me and says, we're at the supermarket, do I need milk? Do you know if we need milk? I think, I remember finishing the milk in my coffee. I know we need milk. Yeah, we need milk. Problem is the context of the conversation implicitly changed the standards for what knowledge is. So it's really, when we're talking about Descartes, our conversation is implicitly setting a particular standard for what knowledge means, namely super high level knowledge certainty.
Well, to a certain degree, it can be, because some people may say, well, what do you mean by knowledge, right? Getting the semantics, like equal semantics to start with, which is...
Yeah, you could do it that way. Some people want to say that there's one definition of knowledge that behaves differently in different contexts. So you might want to say, like, knowledge is having justified true belief unless we're talking about Gettier, in which case you also need some kind of fourth condition to avoid a Gettier type problems. So that could be one way to do it. So there's like many different types of contextualism.
So, but under the line, you want to say, you don't know if you know anything.
No. What I want to say is that in many contexts, I know lots of things. I know a lot about Plato, for example, but that's in the context of I'm a professor telling you about Plato. It's not in the context of Descartes.
Exactly. In the context of knowledge is a certain thing, which means it bases on agreement.
The agreement of the conversational parameters, we could say. We implicitly, like in having this conversation, have certain standards in place. It would be really weird if I just started cursing right now. This is like an academic interview, and even if I normally do curse, it would be out of place here. Similarly, when my wife is asking me about milk, using Descartes' standards for knowledge would just be out of place. Right, exactly.
You won't be having milk for your coffee
tomorrow. Right. So I do think that we know lots of things, depending on certain contexts of the meaning of knowledge.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go back a little bit on questions that I asked. You need to answer them all. Or you good?
No, I don't know the numbers.
So. Okay, that's good.
Not answering.
It happens often in this conversation.
It's a telemarketer.
So I asked you this question before, but it would be still nice to hear it on record. Like why did you get into philosophy? Or maybe even how did you discover philosophy? Or even what was the first philosophical problem you encountered when you were young that you remember? You don't have to answer the whole question, but maybe something in that sense.
Yeah.
like a spark that makes you sit here now being a philosophy professor?
I mean, I know when I was like 7 and 8, I was like interested in stars and where they came from and God and dinosaurs and what happened to them and all that stuff. But I didn't grow up in a religious household and go to church or anything like that. I'd say that like my first exposure to philosophy was when I just decided to take an ancient philosophy class. I had actually recently gotten into religious studies, and I was reading a bunch of like texts on Buddhism and Hinduism and just like, trying to see all the different religions around the world and stuff. And I saw a course on ancient philosophy at my undergrad institution, Long Island University. And I went and took this ancient philosophy class. And I was just like, whoa, this is the coolest thing ever. Mm-hmm. And I never, ever thought that I would wind up working in ancient philosophy. Mm-hmm. But it was an ancient philosophy class that started my whole journey.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and that was not like my main specialty or focus. Like I wasn't like, I want to be a Greek philosophy specialist.
And it's also interesting for me, I think, that you ended up in Plato, because a lot say that the Bible is to a certain degree based on Plato's writing, or like has similar patterns.
I think the Bible is less influenced by Plato than the ordinary Western person's religious beliefs. So I think that if you read the Bible really carefully, most parts of it don't have any kind of Platonic framework in them. But if you were to go down Lenox Avenue and start polling people about the afterlife, they would say they're Christian or Jewish or whatever, but that their beliefs are actually closer to Plato than the Bible. And I think that that's because of St. Augustine. Okay. St. Augustine is a Platonist. He gives Platonistic interpretations of the Bible. That becomes Christian church doctrine. Mm-hmm. That gets put into TV shows, films, movies, video games. And yeah.
Exactly, The Matrix, for example.
The Matrix,
yeah. We're getting closer to the end. Look at that. So now you're teaching. Like, how did you get into teaching? Why are you teaching? Was that just something that naturally happened throughout
your
career?
Part of the PhD. So I got my master's degree in church history. I really wanted to do depth psychology, Freud and Jung. And I had read a bunch of them on my own. And then I started taking class on them, and I just wasn't as into it as I was on like the church history stuff. Mm-hmm. So then I started getting really into these ancient religious texts like Gnosticism and the church fathers like Origen of Alexandria and St. Augustine. And I realized that I was more interested in the philosophy. And then I went and got a PhD in philosophy from Fordham. And as part of the funding package, you have to teach a course this semester for 4 years or whatever.
So do you enjoy it?
Yeah, I love teaching. Okay. Oh my God. I come alive. Right. I look like I'm...
What do you not like about teaching?
Grading.
Grading? Okay.
Especially lower level classes. I actually love reading the Plato papers because like most of you are majors, taking it very seriously, pointing things out in the text I never saw. I love it. Okay. Ethics classes, intro classes, getting 40 papers on the same topic with people who don't want to be there.
So,
and get angry at you with the grade.
Here is my next question. How can a student make you angry, or what quality of a student is there that could bother you or bothers you most?
I don't know if I'm going to get it like angry.
I mean, maybe overstated.
I mean, I did have a student plagiarize a paper once. Oh. And I, filled out the form, whatever. And then she challenged me on it. Mm-hmm. And like, sitting here and telling me, no, I did not plagiarize this paper. And like, I'm certain she plagiarized this paper. And that was annoying. That was like this alternative fact, alternative truths, alternative fact idea, fake
So it was news. A battle about something that both of you most likely knew, and it was just unnecessary bureaucracy.
Yeah.
What is a good student for you, or what is a quality of a good student?
Good students are students who care.
Favorite student type.
Students who care more about learning than their grade.
Oh, okay.
Simple.
Interesting. So my question would be, as a professor, how can you contribute for students to be this ideal student that you see?
I try to make learning interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Try to make the material they're studying fun.
Right.
I try not to overwhelm students so that they can read more carefully. Try to only do like 12 to 15, sometimes 20 if it's easier, pages of reading per class to give you a chance.
Yeah, we'll talk about this after the recording. If you've succeeded with your trial. No, I'm joking.
No, that's what I try to do though, is I try to assign interesting passages. And even like just the way I do my syllabus, like we said, we're reading the Republic, but I didn't make you read all of book 2. I said, these are the important parts.
Able to focus.
Right. And I actually got this from my wife. My wife is a behavior analyst. She works with children with autism. And something she's really insistent on is that the best method of practice is not necessarily what you should do in a particular situation. If you're in Target and your kid wants a candy bar, it is very, very bad to just give in right away. But it is much worse to fight them for a half hour and then give in after a half-hour tantrum.
Because
you taught them that half hour of tantrum will eventually get you what you want. So it's a lot better instead to just know that if you're not going to do it the right way, here's the best alternative method. So instead of like assigning book 2 of the Republic, knowing that average student is going to read 25% of it and then give up, I just highlight the most important 25%, say read that. Those of you who are really enthusiastic, read the whole thing.
That's, I mean, everybody that is still watching can probably tell how amazing of a professor you are. So that's clearly coming through. But I have, because the stand is down, but I want to ask you 2 more questions. One will be that time is relative, right? And Nietzsche would say, well, this thing is going to be here.
Oh, he uses the hourglass.
No, I'm just saying, like, in his thought experiment.
Yeah, no, but his thought experiment is the eternal hourglass of existence is eternally turned upside down again and again.
So I just filtered that out of thin air.
Yeah, I forgot that in my quote. I have the whole thing memorized when I was in college.
But I wanted to ask you, what can one do with a bachelor or master's in philosophy? Will you encourage people to get a major in philosophy?
I think that more and more businesses are starting to realize that all the skills they've been saying they want for the past like 20, 30 years are actually all the skills that philosophy majors have. We want people who could think outside the box. We want people who are good at their feet. We want people who are good at writing, people who are good at thinking through and analyzing difficult problems.
Critical thinking, et
philosophy, yeah. And if you look at like internships at big banks and stuff, they're actually starting to accept philosophy as.
But you see where the problem is here. Like, you study philosophy, you maybe get a PhD in philosophy, you will not end up in a philosophy job. You end up in a bank. I'm just saying, for example.
Yeah, for that
because
person.
You're not studying to be a banker. You study to be a philosopher, and I think there is not a lot of jobs out there.
Oh God, no.
For a philosopher to be what they are, a philosopher. I mean, you as a professor, for example, reached such a goal, right?
Well, I'm not tenured, but
but still,
I got full-time employment as of now. That's something.
As a philosopher, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
But you also see that, like you would still encourage somebody more to do than a bachelor or a master's in that sense or in that case. Because, for example, a master's or a PhD in philosophy kind of means you want to stay in the.
Yeah, so
like, my aspiration is to get a master's in bioethics, which I think is a field that has practicality in philosophy,
I do too.
For example.
Yeah, I think it could open you up to positions, ethically advising hospitals, certain pharmaceutical industries, things like that. In terms of like actually pushing people to get a degree, I think that students need to be aware of what the job market is like right now.
Do you think it's important for, like, yeah, I can ask a question like that. You think it's more important for a student to try to find out what they want to do in their future, or just say like, oh, wow, I really like philosophy and let's see where that takes me, or, maybe, explore just without thinking about the future career?
Well, I don't think that the purpose of education is to get a job.
Oh.
Never has been.
Mm-hmm.
It's a brand new phenomenon. Started in like 2008 with the banking crisis in America. And then all of a sudden parents were like, no, you need to get a good job and blah, blah, blah. And that's where this whole mentality came from. I'm exaggerating a bit, but this was never, ever a part of education. It was a part of trade schools and becoming a craftsperson.
Mm-hmm.
But going to college and studying English and history and all this stuff wasn't supposed to be preparation for getting a job.
Uh-huh.
It was supposed to be something you do to enrich yourself, to become a better person, to better understand the world around you. If you want a master's degree or a PhD for that reason, go for it. I'm fully on board with that.
Mm-hmm.
If you want a master's degree or a PhD because you think it'll help you get a job, you should do a lot of research on that.
Mm-hmm.
Especially the PhD, because it is so time intensive. Master's degree is just a year or two. PhD, 6 to 10 years can take.
It's a lot of stuff.
So you don't want to put all that time in and then realize that you
How
might
about bachelor in that sense? Because I was actually, when was it, 1 or 2 weeks ago at a talk at the Roosevelt House over there. And they were talking about the future of education and what's the purpose of, in that case, college, right?
Yeah.
And they were saying they want to make young kids, students, whatever, feel more attracted to going to school because it will be better for them to get a job in the future. So, you said it's a new phenomenon that they try to go in this way, which was
it's also
a confirmation.
It's also a problem if we have too many people in college. The standards for getting those jobs becomes higher.
Yeah, you go,
So like this question about free college for all. Again, for the first point, for becoming a cultured, educated human being who understands the world around you, great. There should be free college for all. If this is because it's going to help everyone get a job, that's a logical contradiction. It makes no sense. Everybody having the same exact standards, if everyone has a bachelor's degree, that just means you're going to need a master's to stand out. In the same way that you used to need a BA to stand out from those with a high school diploma.
Do you think it will make the world a better place and more people get?
Maybe, but that's only if they actually care about what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
I think half of students, I don't know about half, I think a lot of students are not really trying, cheating.
Which is actually brings me to a question I also had written down, and then we can get into the end of this, but what's a good college for you? What's a good school? What's the characteristic of a good school? Besides good professors, I guess, right? But
it should be professors.
The structure of the school,
this again, there's two different questions. What makes a place a good undergraduate institution versus a good graduate institution?
Let's take undergraduate, maybe.
I think that in undergrad, it's really important to have a variety of different classes and to be able to talk to your professors. So especially at really famous, prestigious schools, the famous faculty there just don't want anything to do with undergraduate students. So if you're hoping to get, I don't actually know if this is true.
What you mean, but it's like they say that, yeah.
Right, yeah. So if you're trying to get a BA in philosophy from I don't know.
You will be taught all your classes by an assistant professor most of the time.
Or no, it'll probably be an adjunct.
Or an adjunct.
Yeah, but almost certainly won't be the assistant professor.
Okay. I don't even know which one would be more qualified than.
Adjuncts.
But yeah, definitely not by the big name professor that you have on the syllabus, maybe. Yeah, I find these insights into your education ideas very interesting. Actually,
thank you.
It opens up new ideas that I didn't have before. This being said, I wanted to ask if I missed asking you something. Is there anything I should have asked you?
I don't think so.
No.
Nothing in particular.
Or something that you would like to add in this sense? Anything?
Nothing in particular. Should I have something to say?
No. It makes it easier as well.
Nothing in particular.
Again, that was a confirmation of what a great professor you are.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this conversation.
Of course. Do I do the clap again?
We can do that, yeah.